Coherence, Chapter 3 of Book 1, Valmiki Explains Desires and describes Rama's pilgrimage to Bharadwaja. Bharadwaja said, "O Brahman, first tell me about Rama. Then enlighten me by degrees with the knowledge of how to attain liberation in this life, so that I may be happy forever." Valmiki replied, "Know, holy saint, that the things seen in this world are deceiving, even as the blueness of the sky is an optical illusion. Therefore, it is better to efface them in oblivion rather than to keep their memory. All visible objects have no actual existence. We have no idea of them except through sensation. Inquire into these apprehensions, and you will never find them as real. It is possible to attain this knowledge. It is fully expounded here. If you will listen attentively, you will get at the truth and not otherwise. Conception of this world is a mistake. Though we actually see it, it never exists. It appears in the same light, O sinless saint, as different colors in the sky. The conviction that the objects we see do not exist of themselves leads to the removal of their impressions from the mind. Thus perfected, supreme and eternal bliss of self-extinction springs in the mind. Otherwise, there is no peace to be had for men like you, rolling in the depths of studies for thousands of years and unacquainted with true knowledge. Complete abandonment of desires, vasana, mental condition, is called the best state of liberation, moksha, and it is only pure step towards happiness. Absence of desires leads to the extinction of mental actions, in the same manner as the absence of cold melts small particles of ice. Our desires uphold our living bodies and bind us together tightly to a bodily prison like ropes. These being loosened, the inner soul is liberated. Mental conditioning is of two kinds, pure and impure. The impure ones cause reincarnation, while the pure ones serve to destroy it. An impure desire is like a mist of ignorance, the stubborn feeling that one is the individual ego. The wise say that individual ego is the cause of rebirth. A pure desire is like a parched seed that is incapable of bringing forth the germ of rebirth. It only supports the present body. Pure desires, unattended with rebirth, reside in the bodies of men who are living liberated. They are like unmoving wheels. Those who have pure desires are not liable for rebirth. They are said to be knowing all things that ought to be known. They are called the living liberated and of superior intelligence. I will explain to you how the high-minded Rama attained the state of liberation in life. Listen to this, so that old age and death may not come upon you. Hear, O highly intelligent Bharadwaja, the auspicious course and conduct of Ram's life, whereby you will be able to understand everything at all times. The lotus-eyed Rama, after coming out of his school, remained for many days at home in his diversions without anything to fear. In the course of time, he took the reins of the government, and his people enjoyed all the bliss that absence of grief and disease could impart. At one time, Ram's mind, virtuous as he was, became anxious to see the different places of pilgrimage, cities, and hermitages. So, with this view, Ram approached his father's feet. He touched the nails of his toes like a swan lays hold of lotus buds. "O Father," he said, "my mind desires to see the different places of pilgrimage, temples of gods, forests, and homes of men. My Lord, grant me this petition, as there is no petitioner of yours on earth whom you did ever dishonor." Thus solicited by Ram, the king consulted with Vasishtha, and after much reflection, granted him the first request that Rama ever made. On a day of lucky stars, Ram set out on his journey with his two brothers, Lakshman and Shatrughna. Having his body adorned with auspicious marks, and having received the blessings pronounced on him by the priest, he was also accompanied by a body of learned Brahmins, chosen by Vasishtha for the occasion, and by a select party of his associate princes. He started from home on a pilgrimage, after he received the blessings and embraces of his mothers. He went out of his city. The citizens welcomed him with the sounds of trumpets, while the bee-like fickle eyes of the city ladies were fixed upon his lotus face. The beautiful hands of village women threw handfuls of fried paddy rice over his body, making him appear like the Himalayas covered with snow. He dismissed the Brahmins with honor and went on to hearing the blessings of the people. He took a look at the landscape around him, and then proceeded towards the forest. After making his holy ablutions and performing his asceticism and meditation tapas, he continued distributing alms as he started from his palace and gradually passed the limits of Kosala. He traveled and saw many rivers and their banks, visited the shrines of gods, sacred forests, deserts, hills, seas, and their shores, far and remote from where men lived. He saw the Mandakini River, bright as the moon, the Kalindi River, clear as the lotus, and also the following rivers: Saraswati, Satadru, Chandrabhaga, Irabati, Veni, Krishnaveni, Nirvindya, Saraju, Charmanvati, Vitasta, Vipasa, and Baduka. He also saw the holy places of Pragya, Narasimha, Dharmanranya, Gaya, Varanasi, Srigiri, Gadara, and Pushkara. He saw Lake Manasa and the northern Mansarava lakes, and many fiery lakes and springs, the Bada, the Vidya range, and the sea. He saw the fiery pool of Jalamukhi, the great shrine of Jananatha, the fountain of Indraduma, and many other reservoirs, rivers, and lakes. He visited the shrine of Karteya and the Gandaki river of Salagramas, and also the 64 shrines sacred to Vishnu and Shiva. He saw various wonders, the coasts of the four seas, the Vindhya range, the groves of Hara, and the boundary hills and level lands. He visited the places of the great Raja Rishis and the Brahma Rishis. He went wherever there was any auspicious sanctuary of the gods and Brahmins. The party, honoring Rama, traveled far and wide in company with his two brothers and traversed all the four quarters on the surface of the earth. Honored by the gods, Kinnaras, and men, and having seen all the places on earth, Rama, the descendant of Raghu, returned home like Shiva, returning to his own world, Shivaloka. So it's an interesting chapter that explains many things. It begins first by pointing out that everything that we see around us is an illusion. This is called in the Vedic literature Maya, magic, that which is not. And it points out that it's better to efface them in oblivion rather than keep them in memory. Well, how do you do that actually? How do you stop something from being kept in memory? Well, what causes something to be kept in memory? Let's look at that. When something is kept in memory, it is because it has made an impression. That means it has carved a karmic trace in the mind. Something remains in memory when it carves a karmic trace in the mind. If one is centered in the mind, then the mind is available for this carving. But if you're centered in the silent witness, then all perceptions pass through without leaving a memory. So this is what he's telling us. We have to always be connected with the silent witness. If we're embedded in the ego, in the conscious thinking mind, then what we see will create a memory or a karmic trace. Why is that? Well, because what we're seeing is illusion, not real. What is real is something else. He goes on to say, The conception of this world is a mistake. So we believe the world exists. That's a mistake. That's a concept. The concept is, we're living in a world and it exists. But we're told that is a mistake. It never exists. So this is a quandary that we need to resolve. How is it that we can see the world and yet it never exists? Well, we're taken back to this wonderful experience of the lucid dream. This is why we focus on cultivating and experiencing lucid dreams. Lucid dreams are a direct path to self-realization. Because in a lucid dream, what we can do is experience exactly this. The conception of this world is a mistake. Though we actually see it, it never exists. So what is a dream? Well, we know when we're in a lucid dream that everything we see around us, because it is a lucid dream, is illusion created simply by our own mind. It is not real. If there are people in this lucid dream, we know that those people only exist in our personally created lucid dream. They don't exist in the lucid dream of any other person. And because they only exist in our dream, as soon as we stop dreaming, they cease to exist. In fact, they never existed, they only appeared to exist. If we're caught up in the thought that things in our mind exist, then we're not in a lucid dream. We're in a normal dream. Now, in a normal dream, it's not very peaceful at all, is it? Sometimes maybe a little bit of happiness, usually chaos, fear, separation. Incredible things are going on in our dream, and we believe them to be real because we're not lucid. But when we become lucid, we see, this is only a dream, and that was just a dream, and was not real. So it gives us a clue. The clue is become lucid when you're awake. If you become lucid now, while you're not dreaming, what does that mean? It means you've taken a step out of the existence that you think is going on all around you. And as soon as you step back from that existence, connecting with that part of yourself that is real, the silent witness, and you observe using the absolute senses of the silent witness what's going on around you, it's obvious. Everything that appears to exist in the world is literally just illusion. It exists only when we become lost in it, when we lose ourselves, when we let go of the silent witness, lose our lucidity, then the world appears real. The fact that the world appears unreal is liberating. because we're no longer bound by this illusion of an apparently real world all around us that is somehow limiting us to various actions. As soon as we realize the world is unreal, anything is possible. We're not limited by the dream that is presented to us. We can change that dream. This is our project. In the Sahasra Sirsha Brahma emergence event, by accumulating enough people working together coherently on a special program of meditation, we can create something much greater than each individual one of us. It is like creating the state of Brahman consciousness in which this group is the being. Like all of the cells in our body, as individual cells have very little functionality. But as soon as all those cells come together into one body, we have an amazing human physical body that walks around and can do things that individual cells can never do. As soon as this group of 1,000 forms, this consciousness that is created by these 1,000 individuals working together emerges and takes on the characteristics of the consciousness of the creator of the universe. Then we can do things that are quite miraculous. We can literally create 1,000 communities around the world for 1 million people. All of it will be done from within the mind of this Sahasra Sirsha Brahma, the 1,000 minds of the Creator working together for one objective. He says that mental conditioning is of two kinds, pure and impure. So we should understand what does a pure mental conditioning and what is an impure mental conditioning. But we know that there are two kinds of karmic traces. If we take the perspective of the Creator, as a creator, we have created the universe in our mind by intention, by desire, by imagination of something that is a perfect universe. Literally, we have the thought of Goloka. Goloka is the absolute universe that exists beyond this universe that we live in. And as the creator, by having a thought of this absolute universe, a memory of it, and letting go in the process of sanyama, then consciousness is ignited, and literally the lucid dream of this universe emerges in the mind of the Creator. Now, there are a lot of interesting features about a lucid dream. One is, in a lucid dream, it's quite possible to experience something for a very long amount of time in the time scale of that lucid dream. And when we wake up and check our clock, we see that we'd only been dreaming for 5 minutes. But in the dream, so many things took place. We rode on elevators to the top of a building. We had encounters with many people. We had long discussions with people. We visited other cities. We did so many things. And then we woke up and saw only 5 minutes had passed. So when the Creator is creating this universe, it's very similar. Those actions to create the universe, the memory of Goloka, then letting go, creates divine karmic traces, energy patterns that exist in the mind of the Creator, around which all of the universe forms. In the Vedic literature, these energy patterns, called the divine karmic traces, are called the Sri Chakra. The Sri Chakra is often represented as a two-dimensional geometric pattern. But it's also represented as a three-dimensional geometrical pattern. But ultimately, it is the geometric pattern of the divine karmic traces. The divine karmic traces create impulses, an impulse to act. Because a dream, a lucid dream, is not like a picture or a stationary object. It is a dynamic action, a dynamic scene. So these karmic traces are like all karmic traces. They are energy pattern routes or ways in which energy flows that causes an illusion to appear like a three-dimensional holographic projection. And from within that three-dimensional holographic projection, we see all around us something that appears real. When we step out and observe it, we see it's being projected by the mind. It is not real, it is only a dream. So these divine karmic traces create the fundamental structures around the world that we see: the trees, the mountains, the rivers, the sky, the clouds. They are essentially created from divine karmic traces. But this dream that we live in is an old dream. It has been going on for quite some time. It has gone through already 3 complete phases and is entering the 4th phase. Now, what happens in a dream at the end? Almost always you'll remember that as the dream is progressing, at first it's all very orderly and beautiful. And you realize, I'm dreaming. What shall I do? Perhaps I want to fly. So you start flying. And then after a while, you decide, well, let me challenge some people and see if they see that I'm flying. And let me tell them, I can fly, but you can't fly, can you? And you can converse with the people. And before long, the dream loses its purity and becomes more and more mixed up and chaotic. And toward the end of the dream, you feel the chaos building, and you realize, uh-oh, the dream is about to end. Then you can apply a few techniques to extend the dream. But basically, as the chaos becomes greater and greater, caused by all kinds of egoic, inspired actions in your lucid dream. See, at first, you were simply the witness of the dream. Wow, I'm dreaming. It's so beautiful and peaceful. And then you have an egoic urge to take action. And as you take this action in your dream, you impart upon the dream creatures urges to take action, and before long, the dream descends into chaos. We see that around us today. The time of chaos is definitely upon us like never before. We can literally remember a time when this chaos did not exist. If we're older than 1 or 2 years old, because it's only existed in such intense form for that period. Those of us who remember September 11, 2001, realize that was also a period of intense chaos, very unusual and not seen before, and seems to have been a starting point for a lot of the chaos we see today. And so we know how this is going to end. If we don't apply some techniques of extending the dream, if we just simply engage in the chaos, we wear our masks, we get our injections, we do whatever the people in the chaotic world are doing, we know exactly where this is going to end. It's going to end in utter destruction. The entire dream is going to collapse. There will be total destruction of the world as we see around us. It will be totally gone. That's what happens when we wake up from a dream. The world is totally destroyed. So we know how this is going to end. This is not some incredible ability to see the future. This is simply knowledge from our own experience in lucid dreams. We're just applying it now to the real world, so to speak. If something isn't done, this dream is going to end. And when the dream ends in a lucid dream, what happens to the dream creatures? What do they experience from their side? Wow, the chaos is getting worse and worse. And some of the older dream creatures remember the time when it was a peaceful dream. And then things started happening that were unusual and strange. And people started acting very unusual and strange, as if everyone is developing some kind of insanity and mental illness. They're thinking, oh, there must be some terrible virus ready to destroy us. We must wear masks, even though masks don't work to stop viruses. And we think that's normal. And before long, the chaos increases even more. And we are going to observe this chaos and know where it ends. Just like in a lucid dream, the chaos always ends in waking up and everything in the dream is destroyed. Well, that's going to happen here. Everything around us, the world, and all the people are going to be destroyed if we don't do something, do some technique that we can do if we're in a lucid dream to keep it going. And what is the technique that we can do in a lucid dream to keep it going? We must restore coherence to the consciousness of the dreamer. And the way we do that, there are a few simple techniques. One of them is to look at your hands. If you look at your hands, you're focusing your consciousness in a certain direction, and that can bring some peace into your ever-growing chaotic consciousness and slow down the disintegration of the dream. And that's exactly what we're doing, isn't it? We're forming this Sahasra Sirsha Brahma emergence event group of 1,000. And as we form this group, it will calm down the consciousness of the world. When it reaches 1,000, it will have the effect of calming the world collective consciousness. And just that will create some additional dreaming time for the world. Well, this is all the activity that goes on from pure desires, because the divine karmic traces have the blueprint, the scheme of a perfect universe. And if we can bring those divine karmic traces closer to the surface of existence, the universe calms down. It is extended. It proceeds more orderly. And the destruction of the end of the universe is delayed. So those are the pure desires. It says that a pure desire is like a parched seed, incapable of bringing forth the germ of rebirth. That means it is not generating any karmic trace, individual karmic trace. And it says also the wise say that individual ego is the cause of rebirth. Remember what we said yesterday about the ego. The ego is the emergence of the collection of individual karmic traces. Now here's a karmic trace about something that was done in one lifetime. Maybe the person drowned. Maybe the person committed some theft. Maybe the person was dishonest. Whatever happened to create a karmic trace, all by itself, that one karmic trace does not at all look like the ego of the person standing in front of you. But if you bring together all of those karmic traces, it creates an emergence effect. And that emergence effect of all individual karmic traces is called the ego. And we know that when someone is at a lower level of consciousness, which means they're predominated by karmic traces of greed or apathy or anger or fear, their ego expresses all that, and they're very fierce and perhaps not delightful people to be around. The ego is emerging from that collection of karmic traces. But as karmic traces are balanced, the ego takes on a refinement, doesn't it? When someone is at level 500, there's love, connectedness, joy, happiness beginning to shine through that individual. The ego takes on that element of joy and happiness and peace and of the characteristics of level 500. But then when moksha is achieved, the ego fades away, and we see innocence in the eyes of the person. Instead of seeing the soul of the person, the ego of the person, and all of the fears and individual karmic traces, when we look in their eyes, we see only innocence and purity. This is when we know the ego is gone. The ego does not exist in a pure desire. Well, as long as the ego exists, it is on a mission to perpetuate itself. And individual karmic traces are the fuel that it burns to keep itself going. So there's more and more lifetimes that are lived. If the karmic traces are of a predominant nature, then the individual is reborn, perhaps not even as a human being. Perhaps the individual is reborn as a cat, or as a horse, or as an elephant, or as a pig, or as any other form of life, any other form of sentient being that is arising from the individual ego of that being, which comes from the collection of the karmic traces being expressed in that lifetime. So if we have only pure desires, we have only divine karmic traces. They're like unmoving wheels. They do not create rebirth. This is enlightenment. This is our objective. And so Vashishta says, if we listen to this story of Ram's life, it's going to help us to understand what's going on around us, to realize that we are living in an illusion. So this is a very interesting chapter, giving us deep insights into how the universe works. And from these insights, we can gain liberation from the bondage of living trapped in an ego that is simply a collection of our individual karmic traces. Tomorrow we go to chapter 4, Rama's return from pilgrimage. Jai Gurudev.